Section 16 of 11 Stories by Henry Hasse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Cinda J. M. Eternal Zemmd Must Die. Part 1. Lancing out of the void at light speed, it stabbed deep into the solar system and vanished. Then began corruption, poison and hate creeping from world to world. Too late, men learned a death blow had been delivered. We've remained indecisive too long. You must understand this. The future, perhaps the very existence of the Federation, hangs in the balance unless we can correlate all that has happened and decide upon a course of action now. De Harry's, correlator for Earth, paced alone in his suite far beneath the council room. He held a sheaf of papers, his intended speech to the planetary delegates. He now crumpled it viciously, flung it to the floor. What good were speeches? Already he anticipated their arguments, the protests and questions. He himself had a question or two. Course of action, he muttered grimly. What sort of action? Action against what? He strode to the immense teleglobe, flicked it on. Its radiant surface reflected the austere council chamber above. Already the 6 delegates were entering. Soon they'd become restless, waiting for him. But still, De Harry's watched. Aladian, Empress of Venus, was there, fragile and lovely despite the grave look on her alabastrian face. She, at least, was aware of the threat to the system which had grown apace during the past few years. In Aladian, De Harry's knew he had an ally to the startling proposal he was going to make. He would need a majority of 4. He couldn't count on Mars. The other 2 votes must come from Mercury, Jupiter, Perlac, or the Castilian colonies. Leaving his suite by a secret exit, De Harry stepped into a lift which brought him near the council room above. 6 pairs of eyes fastened upon De Harry's as he stood at the head of the table. He was a striking figure, 6'2" and white-haired, yet with the perpetual tightness of the jaw and a hint of fire in the dark eyes that belied his great age. You are wondering why I asked for an emergency council, particularly since our Federation has ridden a crust of peace for the past 100 years. Our various governments were never more in accord. He paused for effect, watching the puzzlement grow in their eyes. Nevertheless, I am convinced that we face the greatest crisis we have ever known. I ask for your fullest cooperation. Any data you can submit, anything, may well be a part of the pattern. Courage, the Jovian emissary, shifted his huge bulk nervously. Pattern? Pattern for what? You speak in riddles, De Harry's. A pattern so diabolic it's frightening. A pattern I'm convinced is weaving about us all. For example, Earth's complex civilization, atomic-powered industries, and commerce would be irreparably damaged if we were cut off from the uranium isotope we receive from Mars. You can realize the seriousness when I point out that the annual shipment, which should have arrived a month ago, did not arrive. Jaltagar of Mars was instantly on his feet, his heavy-lidded eyes blazing. I submit that my government is blameless. As you well know, the shipment was dispatched as usual. Your own Earth representatives were aboard. De Harry's turned a smiling countenance upon Jaltagar, which left the Martian overlord abashed. No accusation has been made, De Harry said softly, and none is contemplated. I think we all agree that Mars is blameless. Aladian arose to her full height of 4'11". De Harry's is right. We have delayed too long. I have felt that there is a strange force at work among us. As you know, Venus has long held the secret of allotropic metal, which makes any space fleet invulnerable. We have guarded it carefully. She placed tiny fists upon the table. Yet, our most secret documents concerning the processing of this metal have disappeared from the vault in our royal laboratories. A matter which need not concern us, growled Relic, the Castilian leader. Has it not been the Federation policy for each planet to solve its own internal problems? Save where those problems may affect the status of the Federation, Aladian countered. I submit the theft of our allotropic process is part of the pattern Deharis mentioned. Have you nothing to report, Relic? Nothing that would have any bearing. The Callistian hesitated, then his eyes became worried. Yes. Simply that during the past year there has been an alarming traffic into systems among our people. We thought we had this drug traffic stopped, but now it's growing out of hand. We can't trace how it's being entered and distributed. Under the influence of this drug, our workers become restless and easily incited to revolt. Relic wet his lips nervously. Begging your pardon, Aladian. These to Sith stems come only from the Kayarthan swamp of Venus. Rasping sounds had been issued from Sarek, the sun-hardened little Mercurian. Now he lifted his shell-like body from the chair. His faceted eyes glittered angrily. We are newest in the Federation. We have tried to cooperate in every way. We even permitted the location on our planet of the Federation prison for outlaws and irreconcilables. If what I have to report is part of your pattern, Deharis, make the most of it. Recently, our vast solar reflectors, which protect our cities from the sun, were found to be tampered with. If our engineers had not discovered certain discrepancies in time, thousands of my people would have died under merciless radiations. We are still investigating this foul piece of work. It was deliberate, not accidental. Sarek glared about the table. I hardly need to remind you, we can easily convert our solar reflectors into powerful weapons, should the need arise. At this open threat, such a clamor of protest arose that Deharis pounded for order. He gave the floor to Jal Tagar. Deharis, I see the reason for alarm. Similar incidents have occurred on Mars. In return for our uranium, Earth supplies us with engineers for the maintenance and development of our canals. As long as a year ago, there began a series of breakdowns in our canal system. Already the desert has reclaimed vast areas of our irrigated lands. Carver, the Earthman from Perlac, rose to deliver the final bombshell. Using the frequency tuner, he had traversed the route from his adopted planet in a mere 2 weeks. The strange world beyond Pluto, to which many of the Earth scientists had migrated, was becoming a power and an asset to the Federation. Now Carver announced simply, "We have lost the frequency tuner. The detailed plans of this power unit, which we intended to share with the Federation, have been stolen." Deharis broke the stunned silence. And Venus has announced that the secret of allotropic metal should be shared by the Federation. Each planet knew this. Each would benefit. It doesn't seem likely that any planet individually could be behind these thefts and outrages. There's a frightening purpose behind it all, Relic of Callisto said worriedly. Someone, or something, is seeking to cause disunity, create suspicion. It may easily lead to war. Jal Tagar said, "You have a theory, Deharis?" "A theory and a plan. It is my conviction that in our various governments, in places of highest trust, are men who are not what they seem." He glanced about, saw that the others did not fully grasp the idea. "I mean that literally," Deharis went on. "Men whose minds have somehow been seized, who are now under the control of an alien intelligence, something not of our Federation." Sarek waved a disdainful hand. "Men whose minds have been seized? That is fantastic." "Is it? How much do you know of the members of your own inner council, Sarek? Just one alien intellect planted there could cause inestimable damage. What do you really know of Jal Tagar here? beyond what you see, or of Aladian, or of me. I may be an alien, though I deny it. Any one or any several of us may be other than what we seem. Aladian shuddered, glancing around. It is an eerie thought, and one to ponder upon. But you said you have a plan, Harry's. Yes. He glanced from face to face in the growing silence. A very simple plan, but I like to think it will work. 2. Kurt Emmons paused in his cautious stride. With a supernal sense of keening, he knew he was not alone in the darkness. He threw his shoulders aside. The energast recoil was no more than a soft sigh, but the beam passed so close to Kurt's face he could feel the swirling heat of it. With a muffled cry, Kurt let himself crumple and fall. The muscles of his broad shoulders went tight as he pressed against the hard prison pavement. Weaponless, he realized his only chance was the element of surprise. He saw a darker shadow detach itself from the wall and come toward him. A lone guard. The man stared down for a moment, then relaxed, bent over the prone figure. Kurt propelled himself upward. With an oath, the guard tried to leap back, bring the energast into position. Kurt clawed for the gun wrist. His fingers tightened. The guard was Jovian, Kurt realized with an instant of panic. His other hand found the wrist. His feet moved swiftly, then he threw all his strength into the leverage. Bone snapped, and the 7-foot bulk sailed backward into the wall. But Kurt knew these Jovians. He leapt forward as the guard tried to rise, brought his knee up under the chin with a sickening crunch. Blood bubbled from the man's lips. Kurt sprang upon him, thrust an open hand into his face. He brought the other hand in a vicious, slicing blow across the hard throat muscles. The Jovian plunged forward and lay still. Kurt came to his feet, breathing heavily. It seemed unbelievable that other guards were not attracted to the scene, but all he heard was the steady, hollow sound of the pumps supplying air to the prison dome. He groped for the energast gun, but couldn't find it now. There was no time to waste. He hurried forward, keeping one hand outstretched against the wall. He sought to pierce the darkness ahead. A few minutes later, he paused again as another figure loomed. Kurt wished now he'd found the gun, but it was too late for that. Emmons? Kurt let out a slow breath of relief as the whisper came to him. He hurried forward to greet the other Earthman. You're late, the second man said. What happened? A little trouble. How about the helmets? Get them? Wouldn't be here otherwise. The Martian, did he make it? Yeah, but I don't see why he... Never mind that, Reichert. Kurt snapped. Let's go. They reached one of the gates. The Martian was waiting. Kurt stumbled over another guard, but this one was dead. A tiny back glass needle protruded from his throat. We had some trouble too, Reichert explained. Kurt wondered which of them had the needle gun, but he said nothing. When they had donned the oxygen helmets, Kurt produced a triggered electronic key. I managed to smuggle this. It's the only way we'll make it out of here. Don't worry about the alarms. Just stay close to me. I have a plan. Once in the exit lock, Kurt had a moment of foreboding as he watched the huge inner doors close behind them. Again, he applied the electronic key. The outer doors opened. They stepped into the unending lava waste of Mercury's night side. No sound reached them now, but Kurt knew that already. In the prison dome behind them, the alarm was being given. He hugged the chrysite wall, hurrying along it away from the exit. The others sped after him. Reichert clicked on his speaker. Emmons, what the hell? This is crazy. Is it? Kurt didn't stop his half-running pace. You two agreed I was to handle this. They won't think to look for us so close. They stopped at last, huddling against the wall. A half-mile behind them, the lock was opening again. Two of the surface cars on caterpillar treads blasted out and away, searchlights slashing the ragged terrain. They won't spend too much time, Kurt said. They figure we're dead men already. Never yet had a prisoner succeeded in reaching the Mercury cities, hundreds of miles away on the twilight strip. Kurt's face went grim as he thought of their chances. They weren't trying to reach a city. Their destination was the little mountain range somewhere on the night side. 10 minutes later, the surface cars came back. The prison lock opened and closed. Grimly, the three fugitives headed into the wastes. There'd be no pursuit now. Reichert strode forward, purposeful as an automaton, and he was much like an automaton in other ways, as silent and grim, as big and hard, and as cold. The square lines of his face were unmoving beneath the Christite helmet. Quilo was smaller, but he managed to keep pace. His eyes burned brightly in his finely chiseled face. Only the high-pitched, mad little tune on his lips seemed to keep him going. Kurt Emmons, perhaps more than the others, knew the chances against them. His gray eyes flicked worriedly to the dial inside his helmet. It registered slightly over half, which meant they had 2 more hours of oxygen. It would be close. He set his lips tight, glanced at his companions. He knew Reichert would bear up. It was Quilo who worried Kurt. The little Martian was leg-weary, keeping pace on sheer grit alone. Grit that stemmed somehow from that eerie little tune eternally on his lips. "We're a little ahead of schedule," Kurt lied. "Let's take 5. Quilo sank down gratefully on the hard rock. Even Reichert eased his bulk down. Then in annoyance, he thrust a hand against the Martian. "Damn it, Quilo, turn it off." Abruptly, the tune died on Quilo's lips. He stretched out, gazed with infinite longing at the black sky and myriads of mocking stars. He searched for Mars. Kurt stared back across Mercury's lava waste. The prison dome was well behind them now. He wished he could say how far ahead their objective lay, the little mountain range that straddled half the planet. "Last chance," Kurt told them grimly. "If either of you wants to change his mind, you've got just enough oxygen to make it back. They may let you in again. If you want a month of solitary at the Radite mines. What about you, Reichert?" The big man raised his head, laughed nastily. "Go back to that hellhole? I'd rather die a quick death out here. You getting cold feet, Emmons?" Kurt flashed darkly. He'd only made the suggestion for Quilo's sake. "You, Quilo? There's a chance of our missing Landreth. We've been delayed, and he said he'd wait only 10 hours with the spaceship." The little Martian's face showed white in the darkness. His voice was soft, very soft, and musical as always. "Thanks, Emmons, but I've waited years for a chance like this. If it were 1,000,000 to 1, I'd still say go on." Kurt nodded. Sure, he knew. Quilo was a Martian political, and irreconcilable, exiled to Mercury 6 years ago when Jal Tagar's government had taken over Mars. As to Reichert, Kurt knew even less. The man had been sentenced for murder or space piracy. It didn't matter now. What mattered was that these two knew even less about him. He wondered how long he'd stay alive if they learned his real status. De Harry's had taken into his confidence a mere 6 of his most trusted operatives. They were given widespread assignments. None knew what he would find or where, and Kurt's assignment, the Federation prison, was toughest of all. Not even the prison overseers knew his true identity. Kurt worked with the hardened criminals of all planets, enduring the privations and hardships and awful radite rays. Gradually, Kurt became one of the select group of prisoners who helped unload the supply ship, which arrived twice a year. On its last arrival, just a few days ago, a crew member had slipped a folded note into Kurt's hand. The message stated that Landreth would be waiting on the dark side and would take 3 men. Any 3. It set the time and the place. Landreth. Kurt could scarcely believe his luck. That elusive pirate had disappeared and was thought to be dead. Apparently not. What new scheme was he hatching now? And more important, did it have a bearing on the unseen forces which de Harry's felt were at work? Kurt selected Reichert for the escape because the man was big and tough and could handle himself well in a showdown fight. Quilo he selected for a different reason. It was partly sentiment, but more than that. Kurt had a deep-rooted suspicion that Quilo was more than an ordinary political. Kurt gave the signal, and they continued across the dark, uncertain terrain. Jagged rock cut into their boots. Soon they were forced to circle wide around crevices large enough to swallow a man. Kurt watched the hand on his oxygen gauge drop lower and lower. There could be no turning back now, if they didn't find Landreth's ship within the next hour. Reichert spoke, worry creeping into his voice. "We ought to be getting close now, Emmons. How about using a signal flare?" Kurt peered ahead at the cobalt sky. The horizon dropped sheerly away. He shook his head. "Only got 2 flares. Can't waste 'em. Wait till we sight the mountains." Reichert grumbled, but Kurt saved his breath. Half an hour later, they glimpsed a serrated line of cliffs low on the horizon. Kurt released one of the flares in that direction. They watched it rage in a fiery arc across the darkness for perhaps 20 seconds. Then it disappeared. They waited an answering signal. Anything to guide them. But nothing appeared. The darkness pressed in, almost tangible. Despair washed over Kurt like a cold wave from the sea. "Better set your oxygen flow to 1/2, he advised. They hurried the pace now, heedless of sharp rocks and dangerous gullies. Once Kurt pulled Coelho back from a steep brink just in time. The little Martian was staggering. Could Landreth have given up hope on them and hoisted Graves? At the thought, Kurt hurriedly brought out the remaining flare. With a prayer on his lips, he aimed it, this time in a higher arc. Then Coelho was clutching at Kurt's arm, pointing far off to the left. There was the answering signal. A thin pencil of light slicing upward. It flashed on and off at intervals, but it seemed a long way. Already sharp pains were slicing through Kurt's lungs. He stayed close to Coelho, but the Martian's fatigue seemed to have left him now. He was giving voice again to the peculiar little aria in the higher octaves which Kurt had come to know so well. In that strange tune was a challenge, a promise, and something more. It was pagan. It was strength. It got into a man's soul. It seemed an eternity. They were nearing the cliffs, stumbling into a rocky ravine. They saw the spaceship, Landreth's ship, but the scalpels of fire in Kurt's lungs were unendurable. The spaceship and all the terrain danced and faded away. His legs were leaden. Coelho staggered against him, and somehow he managed to hold the little Martian upright. A vague impression, a spilled square of light out of which a helmeted figure came leaping. Coelho collapsed, sliding slowly away. Kurt plummeted forward, gasped for air, where there was suddenly none. Then utter darkness claimed him. 3. There was air now. Great gulps of it. Someone had thrown back Kurt's helmet, and he could hear the steady thrum of the aerostat. It was beautiful music. Coelho had recovered, and Reichert. And a 4th man was there. As Kurt came to his feet, he heard Reichert's voice, a little suspicious, addressing the stranger. "You're not Landreth. I thought we were going to meet." "Disappointed? Get going then. Back where you came from." The stranger's voice was like a whiplash. He held an electro in his hard-knuckled fist. Reichert became silent. "So, you'd like to see Landreth, eh?" Reichert grinned, wet his lips a little. "Sure would. Don't get me wrong, mister. There's one man I'd like to join up with if he's operating again." Kurt watched the stranger, saw him grin as though secretly amused at Reichert's words. "Later," the man said. "Right now, get this through your heads, all of you. Your lives were forfeit at the mines, and that isn't altered by your being here. I'll blast the first one of you who makes a wrong move." He gestured with a gun, surveyed them coldly. "Good. Now, you will strip, put your clothes over here." He went carefully through their clothes, found nothing in Kurt's or Coelho's, but from a secret pocket in Reichert's leather suit he brought forth a deadly needle gun. A smile creased his dark, thin face. "You won't need this where you're going." The spaceman pocketed the needle gun, then turned suddenly on Kurt, sharp eyes going over him. "Up! Up with that left arm!" Too late, Kurt remembered the thin disc fastened under his armpit, identifying him as an investigator for the Federation Prison Board. He'd adopted that merely as a cover-up. Actually, his mission for Deharis was far more important. Now Kurt shrugged, tore the disc away from the paper-thin duroplast fastening. "So," the spaceman purred, examining it, "you were sent here by the prison board, and we thought no one was aware of the missing prisoners." "Well, I'll be damned," Reichert said, half in anger, staring at Kurt. "If I'd known who you really were, Emmons." "You'd have come just the same," Kurt said icily. "Doesn't really matter who you are," the man with the gun said softly, surveying Kurt's well-muscled figure and clear eyes. "Yes, I'm glad you came. You're the type we need. This one, too," he nodded at Reichert. He turned his gaze upon Quilo. "But I can't understand why you brought this one. Well, we shall find a use for him." At the insult, quick points of fire appeared in Quilo's eyes. Kurt flashed him a warning look. Quilo set his lips tightly. "My name," the other was saying, "is Jeffers. Dress quickly now. Captain Landreth will want to see you. Then we'll be on our way." It became apparent to Kurt that this was no ordinary spacer. It was small and trim, with a suggestion of untold speed. If the ship carried weapons, they were kept well under cover. Jeffers led them along a single corridor with staterooms on either side. "Where's the crew?" Reichert asked. "You three are the crew. Beyond that, there's just me and Captain Landreth." Again, Kurt had the feeling that Jeffers was secretly amused. He ushered them into a compartment near the control room. Kurt stood quite still for a moment, staring around. The room was a dream. Magnificent tapestries, interwoven with crop plumes, covered the walls. Beneath his feet, an imperial Martian rug with a splash of vari-colored splendor. He saw furniture of extinct Jaragua wood, inlaid with mosaics of semi-precious stones. Then Kurt's eyes widened as he gazed across the room and saw the person who rose to greet them. She was tall for a girl. Auburn hair brushed smoothly back from her forehead fell in waves to the shoulders of a close-fitting uniform. Her eyes were blue, but unsmiling. Her lips smiled thinly, but didn't mean it. "I'm Lorene Landreth," she said without emotion. "If you must be amazed, please do it quickly. We have work to do." Kurt was beyond being amazed. Thoughtfully, his gaze took in her trim figure, the pale but determined face, the electro held loosely and a belt at her waist. She gave the impression of knowing how to use it. "Captain Landreth, I presume." Kurt's voice was serious. "George Landreth's daughter?" "Correct, on both counts." She turned to Jeffers. "You made it clear that their status is not altered by their being here?" "Of course. Don't worry. I'll see that they remember it, Lorene." Her eyes blazed quickly. "Captain to you. See that you remember that, Jeffers." He nodded, smiling with faint insolence as he leaned against the door. The girl turned back to the three prisoners. "There is one difference. At the prison mines you worked hard, and for a lifetime, and you died. You will work where we are going too, perhaps not so hard, but dangerously. You may die, but at least I offer you a chance. If we succeed in our mission, you are free men, free to change your identities and go where you will." "That's okay by me, miss." Reichert was enthusiastic. Captain, but look, don't we get to see Landreth? George Landreth. I was counting on..." The girl turned a gaze upon Reichert, which reduced him to silence. "It is my wish that we all may see George Landreth. I may as well tell you now, the purpose of our mission is to find my father." For the merest instant, Kurt saw the deepening look in her eyes which dissolved the mask of hardness. She turned quickly away, seized a sheaf of papers. "We are wasting time here. Jeffers, show them their assignments." Quilo and Reichert followed the man from the room. Kurt hesitated, then stepped into the control room where the girl had gone. He may have been mistaken, but for a moment she had shown signs of being almost human. Kurt stood silent, watching her at the navigator's table. She consulted penciled data on the papers, then swiftly, with practiced fingers, she adjusted the sliding sheaths on the robot control. At last it was finished. She glanced up, saw him watching. "Venus, Kurt exclaimed. So that's where we're going? Her blue eyes surveyed him coolly. So, you can read a robot wheel, can you? What else can you do? Around a spaceship? Almost anything. Tubes, controls, magnabeams, calculations, and differential. Any weapon you'd care to mention, that will do. Her narrow eyes narrowed. I don't like men with me in space who know more about a ship than I do. Suppose you help Jeffers in the rocket room. Very well, Captain. But about your father? Later. Kurt nodded, looked at her a moment, then hurried to the rocket room. Jeffers said brusquely, Do you understand magnetic stabilizers, Emmons? Sure. Help me with these then. As Kurt worked, his mind went back across the years, tying together threads of stories he had heard. Stories about George Landreth, one of the first men to open up the rich new territory on Callisto. He had brought his wife there from Earth. He struck a rich iridium vein and worked it slowly, alone, until the Earth Corporation stepped in. Landreth defied them to the bitter end. His wife died unpleasantly. There the stories varied. Some said that Landreth placed his daughter in the hands of relatives on Earth before he turned pirate. Others said the girl stayed with her father, learning every trick of the spaceways. One thing was clear. Throughout the years, Landreth gathered lawless men about him. More than one corporation had gone to ruin under the incessant attacks of an enemy who had achieved a ruthlessness equal to their own. Then the attacks ceased. Landreth seemed to have disappeared. Kurt thrust these questions from his mind. At last the stabilizers and rocket feeds were ready. Jeffers signaled the control room, and a moment later they swept upward. Endless miles away, near the twilight strip, Kurt could see a faint pinpoint glow of a Mercurian city. He turned to Jeffers. One question, Jeffers. What happened to the other men you rescued from the Federation prison? We've only pulled this stunt once before. The others died. On Venus? Jeffers looked sharply at Kurt, then shrugged. Sure, on Venus. We'll arrive there in exactly 3 days. Reichert came up, wiping his hands on a piece of waste. You know, he grinned, even at the prison, word had a way of reaching us. Any truth to these stories about a Ledian throwing a guard around Venus? We may run into the Imperial Guard, but I doubt if they have many patrollers where we're going. Yeah? Where's that? Jeffers' dark face grinned at them. Right into the Carthan swamp. A sudden cry reached them from beyond the rocket room. Lorene Landreth's voice. Kurt was first to reach the corridor, then he stopped dead in his tracks. They saw Quilo standing straddle-legged in the middle of the corridor. An electro was in his hand. He turned it quickly toward the 3 men, and they fell back. He sneaked behind me and got my gun. Watch him, Jeffers. He'll use it. The warning came from the girl. Kurt saw her crouching out of range near a stateroom door on the other side of Quilo. He can't cover us both. Easy, Jeffers. Get his gun, Emmons. Quick! The Martian's voice came in a high, excited pitch. Kurt saw Jeffers easing behind him, away from the line of fire, glimpsed his hand as it went for his gun. Kurt whirled away, sliced his hand downward into Jeffers' wrist. The electro flamed once, then clattered to the floor. Jeffers leapt for it, but Kurt threw his broad shoulders into a block that hurled the man aside. Then he came up with a gun and back towards Quilo. Nice going, Emmons. Get to those controls. I'll keep 'em covered. They were not quite free of Mercury's gravity, Kurt realized as he felt the spacer surge erratically, threatening to go into a spin. He saw the tight smile on Quilo's lips. Hurry, Emmons. We've got the ship now. Kurt surged past the Martian. Then he whirled, clamped his free hand across the frail wrist holding the electro. A single twist and Quilo's fingers opened. Kurt held both weapons. Get to those controls, he snapped at Lorene Landreth. She stared at him in blank astonishment, then leapt to the controls. A moment later, the ship straightened out, and they were in free space. Quilo's eyes were blazing pools of hate as he gazed at Kurt Emmons. Kurt ignored him, turned to Jeffers and tossed him his weapon. Here, put this away. I guess Quilo can't wait to get back to Mars, but I'll settle for the Carthan swamp. Jeffers leveled the electro. The other gun, Emmons, it goes to Captain Landreth. Quick. Kurt shrugged, walked forward, and handed it to her. She flashed him a smile. Thanks for what you did, Emmons. She came and faced Squealo, surveying him coldly. Little man, can't you wait to die? Let me assure you, another trick like that, and you'll never see Mars again. Squealo stalked away, eyes still blazing hatred. End of section 16.